As more and more is required of fewer and fewer, what you find is politicians concocting new and exciting ways to separate people from their money. The lottery to fund schools, video poker to fund our infrastructure, and a whole host of reverse Robin Hood schemes where low to middle class families in this state finance those with superior means. Friedman highlighted this problem with respect to higher education, these reverse Robin Hood schemes. He famously compared the results at the collegiate level to subsidized UCLA students on a 4-year pleasant interlude, as he called it, where only 50% of them will finish their degree, as compared to the 95% of undergrads at private Dartmouth College who were footing the bills themselves, raising money from alumni donations to maintain the scholarships that help finance their education. The public sector unions got hip to these reverse Robin Hood schemes. And let me give you an Illinois example that just came to light last week. The city of Joliet. Median household income, $47,000. Average city employee salary, $83,500. When you factor in the guaranteed pensions, the average annual cost for each city employee in the city of Joliet, $127,000. Joliet has a $15 million budget deficit this year. Surprise, surprise. The city council at first suggested that city employees pay $100 a month towards their health care benefits, because, you know, right now they pay $0. The unions turned out not to be terribly interested in this idea. So instead, the city is jacking up the water rates by 50% on every resident of Joliet to finance the status quo. Is it any wonder why Illinois has the largest unfunded pension liability at north of $80 billion of any state in the nation? Is it any wonder why families and businesses are fleeing this state like it's on fire? Governor Mitch Daniels of Indiana loves what we're doing here. I mean, he's digging it. He says recently that I really don't need any federal stimulus. I've got the best stimulus going. It's called Illinois and Michigan. So if this information has you despondent, I would suggest asking the waiters to kindly remove the cutlery from your tables, because I want to talk about education next, which Joe alluded to. I think it's worth noting that the foundation left to carry on Milton Friedman's seminal work is not named the Friedman Foundation for Tax Cuts, right? It's named the Freedom Foundation for Educational Choice. Milton Friedman understood that if we get education right, a lot of our other problems become much easier to address. If we get young people on a track to be successful, independent adults, that obviates the need for government's phony do-gooderism in the form of social welfare programs. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed that all truth passes through 3 inevitable stages. First, it is ridiculed. Secondly, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as being self-evident. Milton Friedman's insight and courage nearly a half-century ago with the publication of Capitalism and Freedom, which was discussed, carried us through the ridicule and through much of the violent opposition to school choice in the primary and secondary grades. His views have been accepted as being self-evident in 14 states that run 24 different school choice programs today. But of course, there are always bad examples, there are always slow learners, and the city of Chicago is both. For $6 billion annually, the Chicago public school system will graduate only half of its students. 6 in 100 CPS freshmen will earn a BA by the time they're 25. 6 in 100 in a system of 400,000 kids. Interestingly, for those who recall the Free to Choose program Friedman did on school choice, he highlighted none other than Hyde Park High School as an exemplar of failure in the city of Chicago. Guess who agreed with Friedman many years later? A state senator from Hyde Park, who had the connections to send his children to the University of Chicago lab schools. Those same children now matriculate at Sidwell Friends, private school in Washington, D.C., while that same former state senator, as Joe Bass mentioned, recently chose to eliminate the D.C. school choice program. There are 2 great paradoxes when it comes to education, particularly in the city of Chicago. The first is that politicians reject in theory what they do in practice. What do I mean by that? What are charter schools? What are magnet schools? They are choice. They are competition against failing neighborhood schools, where folks are discriminated against based on their income and their address, relegated to schools that everyone knows will fail them. 4% of the kids get to go to magnet schools or charter schools. But for some reason, that's unclear to me, that choice is not extended to the other 96% of the kids. Here's another interesting note. According to the Fordham Foundation, 40% of CPS teachers send their kids to private schools. I wonder what they know. They certainly believe in the choice that they have. If you listen to Mayor Daley speak, and I know that is not enjoyable, he actually endorses school choice. He just doesn't know it. So please don't tell him, because we don't want him to stop even the incremental progress he's making. Earlier this week, Mayor Daley was asked whether an investigation into Chicago's elite schools might reveal a clout list similar to that at the University of Illinois. His reply, quoting here, "Thank God people want to get their kids into school. Usually they're fleeing to the suburbs. This is unbelievable." Now, I'm not sure if that is unbelievable good or unbelievable bad. But here's what I think he means. What I think he means is, when given a choice, Chicago parents would prefer that their children attend the best schools. But a dearth of top quality schools in Chicago, or even mediocre schools, has forced many parents to send them outside of Chicago. As parents want the best for their children, this is understandable. Again, our executive muses, and I'm quoting here, "Years ago, no one even wanted to go to any Chicago school. We only had one school. We had Whitney Young, and you had thousands of applicants." Right. You know, I love his dissociative episodes. He has these press conferences where he gets up there and says, you know what, somebody should do something about the Chicago public schools. What I think he means is that prior to the magnet schools in Chicago, there were only poor-performing public schools operating free from any kind of oversight. When Whitney Young opened its doors in the early 70s, it demonstrated that competition for entry produces top-quality institutions and top-quality students. If students wanted to get the best education available, they had to study. And it worked. Thousands of students applied to Whitney Young, many times more than there were available slots. This proves that if you offer a better choice, most parents will take it, or certainly try to. The mayor cites the evidence. I'm quoting again, last time. "Now we have Jones. You have Northside Prep. You've got Gwendolyn Brooks. We got Walter Payton. And we hope to build 4 or 5 more as quickly as possible. What we have to do is build more magnet schools all over the city." It's choice. Great. The mayor can name 4 quality high schools, and he plans to build a few more. Here's the problem. What about the children in the other 120 Chicago public school high schools? They are in high school now, today. They don't have time to wait for the mayor to build a few more schools, and that they cannot attend, or build more magnet schools at some point in the indeterminate future. The lack of a sense of urgency about children in failing schools in this city and this state, a point the mayor effectively concedes, is what is truly unbelievable to me. Because the demand for good schools is so clear, the Chicago Democrats grudgingly acquiesced and created more. But of course, with all the speed of a pregnant yak. We were talking about this earlier. Yeah, finally we have, for 10 years, everybody has lauded the idea of charter schools. And yet we were locked in at 30 for a decade. If it's so great, then what's the way to introduce more? The magnet and charter schools have produced better results, but as I said, only 4% of CPS students have that option. If 4% of students deserve this choice, which is benefiting them, a point conceded by all, why don't the other 96% of students deserve the same choice? This brings us to the second great paradox of education in the city of Chicago.